Kanye West, baby! 2020!
That does not stand as an actual endorsement.
No, it does. I'm throwing my chips.
Okay,
Yes.
you can
Okay,
do
we'll
that
take a
personally.
vote.
Okay.
We'll take a vote. If we vote in majority for Kanye, we will
destine it to happen in real life.
It's the official endorsement of this
Official-
podcast.
Yeah.
Very well.
All right, Travis.
All on eyes on three. One,
No,
two,
no, no,
three.
no, no,
Aye.
no. You have to go in a row.
All right, yeah. Travis.
No, Michael McGee first.
Oh, Michael McGee. Gets
Michael
All
McGee
right.
votes no.
Yeah, all right. I say yes.
I say yes too.
I mean, Kanye 2020.
Yeah.
The private
You have
sector
to say yes or
officially
no,
endorses.
aye or nay. That's an official.
He's dodging the issue.
I'm sorry, you damn Constitution.
Brilliant.
I don't adhere to the law or the Constitution.
Sovereign citizen.
Oh
Travis
yeah, I
Schultz.
forgot. You have recently adopted Eastern philosophy stuff. You're now a
Yeah,
communist.
that's right.
Yeah.
I'm a collectivist.
If you, okay.
Yeah.
we
There
will.
go.
We will get.
We'll get to that.
If
First,
you think communism is an Eastern philosophy, you,
Oh no,
you are.
I know.
are
It's been.
pagan.
It was adopted. It was adopted by the East. It was developed by drunk Prussian
An
man.
Eastern fellow.
Well,
A
Anyways.
middle.
we'll discuss
fellow.
that later. Well, I want to talk about third parties. I want to talk about third parties in the United States
Yeah.
of America.
Yeah, like the birthday party and its candidate, Kanye West. Honestly, this man is a legend. I'm going door to door wearing a party hat and one of those little things,
Yeah.
you know,
No.
and
You know, an
campaigning.
air horn. You gotta go with
The
an air
thing
horn.
that kills me is that I genuinely think if he took it seriously, he could win.
I know.
Right.
He's gearing up for 2024 is what's happening.
I've heard that he's out, but I've also heard that he's filed with the FCC.
Right.
So I think that
So I'll go through the
FEC.
timeline.
He's also bipolar, so that explains
Oh my
that.
goodness. Okay, I will go through the timeline. July 4th, Kanye West announces that he's running for president.
Yes.
And everyone's like, well, when are you running for president? Right now. Even though that he's missed the FEC filing deadlines for 5 states.
which
five
are
major
all
states.
like big vote, like
Right.
Texas and New York.
And then yesterday, as of this recording, there was one of his actual campaign staffers, like a big head up guy, said, "Yeah, no, Kanye's not running. He's given up." And then today,
After like a week.
and then today,
They filed.
he filed in Oklahoma. So,
I think he may just win Oklahoma.
and so far we've had no actual comment from the man himself,
Here-
from Yeezy
No,
himself.
He's bipolar. That's
Yay.
what he is.
It's
That's
true.
what it is.
Here, I mean, I don't like making fun of it, but yeah, I mean, he's inconsistent in terms of his strategy, which is good when you're an artist because, like, okay, start 1 billion projects, finish 5 of them. That's how you
yeah.
That's how I do things. But like, to make an announcement so publicly.
He's 100% a publicity genius, just like Donald Trump.
Right.
And so he's gearing up for 2024.
But
There's no
he-
doubt in my mind.
But he could. I don't know. I think that he's kind of shot himself in the foot in an uncomfortable way. What he's gonna do, I genuinely think this is, if he was going for this year, or if he's going for next year, what he's gonna do is he's gonna be Andrew Yang-esque left-wing fiscal policies and Trumpian evangelical revivalist
Yep.
right-wing social
Yep.
policies.
He's already come out as very pro-life and
Very
anti-vax.
Oh, that's right. He's
Yeah.
anti-freaking vax.
I don't know
That's
how
right.
like anti-vax he is or just like
I will
pro-vax
say,
choice.
taking an anti-vax opinion during a
Is
pandemic
pretty bad.
Is
It's pretty ballsy.
It's gonna throw him down.
But listen,
Well, he's not gonna win this year.
Imagine Kim Kardashian.
As the first
As the
lady.
first-
Okay, just a patriotic thong.
I know. Bob
White
Beckel,
House.
formerly of Fox News, would be very happy about that. 'Cause
Oh my god.
There's nothing more American than Kanye West as president and
It's
Kim
true.
Kardashian as the first lady.
It's true. And here's the thing: is that like
Goodness.
and Andrew Yang as the vice president.
If your
Oh my
definition
gosh.
of that is like a cancerous upper class version of America, then yes, this is the most patriotic.
Kanye is of
choice.
the people, dog.
oh my gosh,
Goodness
I
sakes.
think oh my gosh, it's just like it's genuinely frustrating to me because I think that if he had a good handler and he kept his nose down and he actually had good people surrounding him, good politics people, I think he could genuinely kick some major A in this election.
Right.
Because I mean, I don't on Twitter everyone's talking about how much he's if you vote for Kanye, is a vote for Trump because you're pulling votes from Biden. It's an absurd proposition that he's pulling votes from Biden.
Yeah.
Like he is a good old fashioned revivalist tent preacher, if ever I saw one.
I'll say this, okay? I understand where a lot of people on the left, even moderates, are coming from when they are worried about Kanye siphoning votes from Biden, because they recognize that 90% of the black population votes Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
But they also recognize the power what a black candidate can do for the black community to actually show up and vote. Because for 2008 and 2012, when Barack Obama ran, record number of black people coming out to vote for him. And then in 2016, the black community, yes, voted overwhelmingly in majority of Hillary Clinton, but not nearly. You didn't have nearly as much
Abysmal
turnout.
numbers.
A lot more stayed home. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so what they're worried about is that the people who will vote for the candidate that they think will represent them best, which would be a fellow member of the African American community, will go out and vote for them, and they say, okay, what pile is that going to pull from? The 10% that vote independent or Republican, or the 90% that vote Democrat? So that's where I think that logic
It's
comes
also
from.
just a focus that any votes away from Biden are going to be bad for them. I mean, in 2016, a lot of people stayed home just because they were mad that the DNC stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders. And so, you know, Hillary, that she should have had it in the bag. It was a terrible, terrible race, terrible candidacy.
She ran so poorly.
She was probably one of the worst candidates since Michael Dukakis.
For sure. So
the
if
Democrats
people are
to show
saying
up.
vote for Biden, don't waste your vote on Kanye, they're obviously only speaking to potential Biden voters. So they just want to make sure they have every Biden vote possible.
Yeah, exactly. But like he's like Kanye, people don't vote for policies anymore. They just don't. They vote for aesthetics
and personality.
And
For sure,
Kanye's-
personality.
Kanye's aesthetics are that of
People dance at his rallies.
His aesthetics are great. I almost wore my Yeezys,
His
but
concert
we're not
art-
being videoed, so I couldn't flex. So
His rallies will be actual concerts, right?
Yeah.
I suppose is possible.
no, he'll open with the Sunday service choir, which would be
yeah.
awesome.
I would be okay with
But
that.
this is the thing, right? Like this is one of the reasons that Andrew Yang was also really deadly, and I genuinely think today, if Andrew Yang won, he would stand a pretty decent chance if he was running third party, because he you gotta understand that Andrew Yang, how most people interact with him is as the nerdy Asian dude who's going to use math to solve everything, which he leans so far into.
That's what his image
in
is.
his marketing campaign.
He literally said, "I'm Asian, I can do math."
Yeah.
In one of the debates,
which is such aggressive Republican tribe mentality.
Yeah.
And so what he and you look into him, this guy is classic suburban Jesus mom dude. It's you look at his social media,
Very
he's
calm.
like the super the Facebook mom memes. Thank you, Jesus, for this day. He was totally ready to be the freaking sweet home Jesus dude who had all these left-wing policies. And so if you accept that people are voting mostly aesthetically, then you accept that someone like Yang, who's aesthetically very Christian but has extremely left-wing talking points,
Right.
presenting a Christian image, talking in left-wing ways, that's deadly. That's so deadly.
If Yang ran third party, I think he would pull the same amount of votes from both sides. He had such a broad appeal.
Well, because Clinton lost primarily because Trump was talking to the working class.
Yeah.
And because of Yang's ability to talk to the working class, and he does talk to the working class extremely well. And everyone focuses on his UBI, but that's his least interesting policy. He is a classic populist. And the issue is that the Republicans aren't really the conservative party. They're the party that has a lot of conservatives in it.
Right.
And the Democrats aren't really the liberal party. They're the party that has a lot of left-leaning people in it. So you want to pull people from those parties, you're pulling across ideological lines pretty easily.
You want to say anything?
I don't. My only comment is Eric went into this talk wanting to talk about Kanye, but it's clear that we're talking about Andrew Yang right now.
Yeah.
Well,
Because he's more important and better.
I didn't want to talk about Kanye necessarily. Kanye's a good meme. I want to talk about the party system in the United States. Because here's the thing.
Right. Yeah.
The classic truism is that America can never have a third party because of first past the post voting.
Right.
If you look at other nations with first past the post voting, you have yourself Canada, you have yourself most of Europe, honestly, Britain especially. You have South Africa, you have most African countries, you have Japan, you have South Korea.
Right.
You all of these places have healthy third and fourth party choices. Even with the first past the post model, America is a real freaking anomaly being a two-party system. It's a real weird
Here's
anomaly.
what I'll say about that is that yes, they have multiple parties, but they will always form two coalitions. The government,
Yes.
But more deep into that is that they have when they form those coalitions, it will force the majority party, governing party, or even the majority opposition party, which is forming the minority, to lean either more to the left or more to the right.
Yes.
For example, the Labor Party had to adopt the socialists, and they adopted them directly, and that naturally made them move more towards the left. And since in the UK's last election, Boris Johnson destroyed Labour, and he won the largest conservative majority ever. And so what was Labour's response? To can the socialists and put the more moderate Labour members up in charge.
But this is the thing, is that you were able to have... So the classic argument when you talk about that is that, America's just doing it more efficiently. Like, we're just having two parties, and everyone else can have their multiple parties.
I wouldn't even say it's about efficiency, is that it happens naturally within the party. What has happened to the Republican Party over the last 10 years... or even more so than that, the last 15 years. They've moved more generally to the right because people are voting for more. There are more further right
within
people
the
in
primary
power
system, sure.
Yeah, within the primary system, but some of those people are winning in the general election.
Right, but here's the thing: is that it's more difficult in America for politically different people to talk to the system.
Right. They
And
usually
when you
have to be
look at-
extremely antagonistic to the system.
When you look at other parties, even Britain and Canada, and parties with in Canada, there's only been two parties in power ever.
Yeah.
The Conservatives and the Liberals. And yes, the Liberals. And there are these other parties that are super important to the process because they determine coalition building, they determine what laws get passed, they determine how radical the government is allowed to be. And there's no mechanism in America for people to have those pressures put on government, because you can be another right-wing party and you like right-wing things, but if you're not part of the dominant conservative branch, you can put pressures in ways that members of that party can't do. And I'm just fascinated by the utter lack of third-party success in America.
I think it's just the same thing with less formalities in America. The Democrats are excellent at coalition building, and they've adopted the socialists, they've adopted the Green Party people. I mean, we have the Green Party and the Libertarian parties officially, but all the real Libertarians are in the Republican Party, and all the real Green Party members are in the Democrat
and so
Party.
they just don't get to talk to the system as well.
They do. They just don't label themselves as openly.
It's very rare when people who do vote for those third parties actually make a difference. The only real make a difference when they vote. The only recent example that I can see is that 10,000 people voted for Jill Stein in Michigan in 2016. If those 10,000 people had voted for Hillary Clinton would have won that state. She would not have won the Electoral College majority because Trump got that with Wisconsin and Pennsylvania.
Right.
But he won Michigan because Hillary Clinton bled votes to Jill Stein.
Right, but here's the thing: is that that's the vote splitting theory is all well and good, but why? Two questions: why does it only exist in America? Why does this strict two-party system only exist in America? And two, what is the benefit or drawback of having more options that voters could realistically engage with? Because I've never heard anyone say that, oh, I just don't like these other parties. It's always, well, they don't stand a chance. I'm so baffled by why America is this one sample case in the entire world.
I think what you have is that there are a lot of people a majority of people who vote are strict party loyalists. You have 30% of people in America that vote Democrat and 30% of the people who always vote Republican, right? That's 60% of the voter base. They will get their way because the people in the middle will never really fully agree with themselves.
But you'd still end up with like...
And
you'd
I would
still,
also say,
and we're super close to doing this. Like you look at Canada and they have a three-party system, right? They have the Conservatives, they have the Liberals, and they have the NDP. Like you get people who vote weird, and it's genuinely baffling to me, and I think that it genuinely does hurt the American political discourse when you only have two factions that really aren't that different from each other.
It absolutely does, because it just polarizes the conversation. People have to be party loyalists because they have an enemy to beat. There's no other options. That's not who I actually align with closest.
Or you could, here's the question I have. Why don't people vote for one party when they're voting for their congressperson and another party when they're voting for president?
Some people do.
Some people do.
There are a lot of people in Oregon who really like their senators and will vote for Republican presidents nonetheless.
That is normal in European democracies. You vote for your parliamentarian person, and then you vote different for your president. France, that's how France does it all the time.
Yeah.
It's just I guess I'm saying it over and over again, but I'm just utterly baffled that America, and I've looked deep into this, America is a one case study.
Well,
in the entire
America
world.
is unique in several different ways and in several different facilities. And I think in a way too, a lot of Europeans, drive off of tradition.
Sure.
Whereas what does America have? America has a very short-lived lifespan in terms of how long nations have lived for. Right? So we have 240 some odd years of history, and in that history, our strongest tradition is that we have the Republican Party and the Democrat Party. Right? I would say, politically speaking, that's one of the stronger traditions that exist. And so I would say that it is based in how people feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're going to get when you're voting for the Libertarian. Are you going to get somebody who's more Rand Paul-esque? Or are you going to get one of those weird people that they have at the convention that takes their shirt off and dances on stage?
Well,
that was an actual Libertarian Party sanctioned thing.
Gary
It was
Johnson,
really Gary Johnson. What is Aleppo? I'll never get old. That will never get old. What
My
is
favorite
Aleppo?
moment is when he faked the heart attack.
Yes.
Because he smokes weed. So good. But I think the system and the size and scope of America is one of the reasons why it's so polarizing.
I was going to mention geography.
There are just so many people, and it's so spread out. I think that we could realistically have successful third parties at the lower levels of government, at the localized representation, because people aren't as focused on being party loyalists. They are, like you're saying, just voting for someone who they feel connected to.
Well, but here's the other question. Okay, so you make a good point. Okay, America is massive. It has a lot of people. And so that might be one of the reasons why there's more of this coalition building thing. And that was my instinct too when I was researching this stuff. But I found actually no. When you have a big, complex, diverse place, what you get in reality is regional parties. Britain has a regional party, Canada has a regional party, frickin' India is just regional parties, basically.
Yeah.
It's very bizarre to me that there's not a Cascadia party or something like that.
I will also say the founders thought that would happen, and it didn't happen. And I think one of the reasons why is because the political parties in America operate more like businesses than they do government entities.
Right.
Because political parties in Europe will act more like government entities, right? A person who is running for prime minister will have his, shadow council or whatever it is. The people who are running, who he says or she says, this will be my minister of transportation. This will be my minister of defense, etc.
Right.
Right? In America, you don't have to be held to this government standard. The Republican Party, Democrat Party are fundamentally, first and foremost, businesses.
Well, and that's the crazy thing, isn't it? Is that there's no, this is unique. This is another unique thing in all the world, is that there is no central enforcement mechanism.
Right.
If you get elected, like, we can't kick people out of our parties. That's very weird.
It's hard when it's hard to do, and it's really strange and unique when it does happen. Like AOC, for example, was an example of kicking out one of the old guard, and then she took his seat.
No. I'm saying that there's no way, like there's no way to get someone elected. All right, you are an elected Republican, you are an elected Democrat, and we decide you're bad for the party. Out.
Right.
Like that is something that is the norm. And so as a result, there's no real ideological...
It's usually due to social pressures when someone is forced to leave. If a Republican says something super racist, the social norm in there is that the Republicans will pressure them to leave the party or to resign.
Right, but no, they're not pressuring them to leave the party. They're pressuring them to leave their position and open it up for another Republican. They're like, in Britain, you don't vote with the party line. This is where the term party line comes from, is that the whip will underline a voting issue.
Right.
That's the party line. You don't vote with the party line, you get kicked from the party.
Okay.
And like you retain your seat, but you're not in the club anymore.
But that's so undemocratic. You're the only person who should be affecting that representative's choice is their constituents.
Right.
And if their constituents are going to vote them in because they made a certain vote, then they should make that vote.
Right. But it reduces parties down to colors, and that's all they are. Like if you vote for Republican, okay, I'm voting for the Republican running in my district. Okay, you've told me nothing. You've told me absolutely nothing about this human
So then
being.
we're just talking about, labels. It's nothing of
Right.
substance.
And
obviously, Andrew Yang is significantly different than Bernie Sanders, even though they're
Right.
well, although Bernie Sanders is kind of independent now. But anyways,
Oh, he is an actual registered independent.
he's an elected
They just
independent,
allow him to
but he
run.
was running as a Democrat for president.
Yeah, right.
Very different people. So sure, it might be easier if the labels were more specific, but they don't need to be. You look at the candidate. What do they actually say?
But they do need to be. They super need to be, because the average American voter doesn't actually. The average American voter doesn't even Google the person they're voting for. They say
Maybe that's why we only have two parties.
No, this is the issue, is that the average person doesn't even Google who they're voting for, no matter what democracy you look at. And so you have a situation where people saying, I like the color red. I like the color blue. And that's the entirety of their voting information.
I think that's nowhere near half of the population.
No, I think he has a good point there, because we mentioned earlier that it's like a business. These two parties, they're really like corporations, and the only 90% of the voter base, I feel like, when you go up to them and you ask like, who are you voting for and why, they'll either name two things. They'll either name the party or they'll name the president.
Yep.
Those are the only two things we vote on. We never vote on any like local, county, or state issue.
Most people
Which is
don't
like-
understand that they're not even voting for a president. They're voting for
Right.
people to go vote for that president that they're choosing.
Right.
Because that's how the electoral college works.
Right. But if you ever wanna go to the most useless thing ever, it's the party conventions, and like the state party conventions or the national party conventions. Because what you do is you go there and you vote on a platform. Hey guys, we're getting together and we're voting on the Republican Party platform. Yay! Okay, you do that with the conservatives in Britain. That means something, because you can determine whether or not you're a part of the club. So if you're too against the platform, you're not part of the club anymore. Therefore, when I think, I like the color blue, and therefore vote conservative, you actually know what you're voting for. The symbol is useful.
Right.
Yeah, but then they're only looking at the color blue, not what they're voting for.
No. But the symbol is when we deal with symbols, right?
Yeah.
So you have a cross, right? What is that indicative of?
It depends on the person you're asking.
It is indicative of the body of theology of Christianity, and you, instead of sitting down with a person and saying, "Oh, what do I believe?" You can use the symbol of the cross. That's what symbols are. Now, the symbol of Republican has nothing behind it. The symbol of the European conservative, there is something there. There's something solid that can't be moved.
So this might be good at catering to the least involved and perhaps the least caring of voters, but I think it gives too much power to parties, first of all, because they can control what their representatives, what their members are doing more than the constituents can in some cases. And then secondly, I don't agree with your analogy. If I just say, hey, I believe this cross, they could take that a million different ways depending on their experience.
And so if you actually think that, get rid of the cross. Burn every single one of them.
Well, no,
they're useless.
you talk about
You just
it.
said that they're useless.
You talk about it. I didn't say it was useless. I said that's not where the conversation ends.
No, but it's not where the conversation ends. But we have to ask ourselves, why do we as human beings use symbols? We use them as shorthand to communicate eminently complicated ideas. And so if you want to symbolically say, I'm a conservative, you symbolically say, I'm a Republican. But there's no mechanism to make that symbol mean anything. Therefore, it means nothing. And therefore, without a system to say, well, okay, what is Christianity? AKA the scripture. You don't have anything. You just have, oh, I don't know, the fish looks pretty on the back of my truck. Like that, symbols only are operatable when you have tangible forces behind those symbols.
Yeah, but the cross also is all-encompassing. We're talking about Mormons. We're talking about David Koresh. We're talking about...
Sure, I can co-opt a symbol all I
Yes,
want.
that's what I'm saying. But what is worth more? The symbols having significant meaning, or the people and constituents having more influence than the parties?
Overwhelmingly, the important thing is acknowledging reality, which equates to realizing that people use symbols to oversimplify their world, meaning it's more important that those symbols are understandable by the people. That is, like if I were to, Travis, this is something that communists do all the time. Hey, you're oppressed because you're a member of the working class. Bam, 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 bam. Here's 30 books to read by tomorrow, and then you'll understand. That's how you get communist converts. Is you overwhelm them with theory. If you want to get a Christian convert, you say Christ died for your sins, repent and be joyful. And that's all you need. So if the question is, knowing that we're talking to the lowest common denominator, because that's the definition of democracy, and knowing we're talking to the lowest common denominator, should we make our symbols understandable or accurate?
The lowest
answer
common
is
denominator
accurate.
doesn't vote. And then beyond that, people who do vote and are the lowest common denominator of people who actually show up and vote, they can see when their representative votes for a tax they don't like. They can see when their representative impeaches or doesn't impeach a president.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes that's
Most
not
of the
case.
time.
Yeah.
Trust me, man, I've interacted with the average voter, and this isn't a knock on the average voter. Not everyone's like me, who actually looks into every single thing that their representative
Not
votes
everyone's
on.
as cool as Eric.
No, I'm exhausted. But you
man.
need the.
I'm gonna
Yeah, go
I'm
for
gonna
it.
say something, and this is why I'm getting behind Eric here. I am someone that has a lot of faith in the individual. Okay, I'm also the worst critic of the individual. I'm not necessarily sure how that works, but that is the case. I know that the individual in a totalitarian state, when they tell the truth and they do it in a way that's very clever, can overcome that totalitarian state. That's been shown time and time again. However, the individual in a democracy is profoundly stupid. They're usually profoundly immoral at times, and it's not something I necessarily like saying because I like democracy and I like individuals, but I've been reading a lot about the civil rights recently. What I'm basically reading is the federal government dragged America along the way. When as the average voter, like, I read a statistic, it's like 75% of Americans believed in segregation.
Which is so bizarre.
And then the federal government drags us along the way and gets rid of that.
I will say that before the federal government dragged America along the way, there was a huge cultural revolution that took place during that time that a lot of people completely forget about. And a lot of people think it was, Martin Luther King Jr. that he did that, and he did. But he had help along the way, especially with Billy Graham. Billy Graham went to the South and said to all the racists, "You are a sinner, and you are no better of a sinner than someone who's black, and you are sinning when you are being racist towards someone who just has a skin color different than you." He was able to change people's hearts and minds, which is the federal government, probably dragged along the rest who didn't adhere to that message.
But politics is always downstream of culture. The government is never going to take a controversial stance if it doesn't know that it's going to have enough people behind it.
If it's democracy, which is here's the other part to elaborate on what you're saying, Travis, is that okay? Let's take not the extreme views, but let's take the two views that have been espoused. The parties should have more control over self-definition versus the only moderator of self-definition in the party should be the individual voter. Now, the reason that I am a defender of parties, and I'm being very harsh against the party system in the United States, but I am a defender of party politics, is because if you go to the other direction and just say, actually, let's get rid of parties and just make it maximally just what the people want, what you have in that situation is a situation where it is so easy to skip around the ignorance of the voter. And the ignorance of the voter is not necessarily a negative thing. I, as a voter, should not be obsessed with every movement of government. I should be able to have it simplified for me so that I can deal with it. If I have 5 people running and they don't have affiliations, they don't say, I'm on the side of this issue and this issue and this issue, it's so easy to dance around and just get completely by people's self-interest. Getting rid of parties maximalizes the tyranny of representatives. It makes their job so much easier to get around.
But don't you think it would be easier for a whole party working together to manipulate the voter? And don't you think that it would be more complicated for a voter to figure out the party platforms of 4 parties and have to choose between those? How are they? They're just going to choose the favorite color from 4 colors instead of 2.
Here's the reason why I think that's not true, is that when I was doing things in Corbyn's student government, the overwhelming, most effective method was to pretend like we weren't associated with each other. I was a total builder of conspiracies. I was a total builder of secret political parties, which completely kneecaps the capacity of the individual voter to do anything. Because all it means is that I'm having the same conversations I'd have with a political party, but you don't know about them. And as soon as you introduce parties that have the capacity to self-define, that is eminently more informative to the voter than an individual running by themselves.
I'll say this on this matter. I also think that the reason why we continue to have the two-party system, right? The last time that the two-party system was seriously challenged was when Ross Perot ran against. He was also the last time that we could possibly get another World War II veteran to become president of the United States. But yeah, so I think that tribalism has just increased so much that, when you're a Republican or you are a Republican-leaning independent, you're thinking, man, we can't let those Democrats get control.
Right.
And then the same thing on the other side. We can't let those Republicans get control, so I have to vote Democrat. Right? I hear so many people take up that position. And tribalism increasing in America is only going to make it more difficult for third parties, fourth parties, fifth parties to try and get anywhere. And plus, you are also seeing that start to happen in Europe too.
Oh yeah.
The third party, fourth, fifth party, they're shrinking.
They're having a really hard time, and it is tribalism. That's absolutely accurate.
Something I would really encourage is try. If you ever find yourself in Wales, go to some of the conservative Wales districts and ask, why didn't you vote for the Welsh candidate, the Welsh national candidate? Why'd you vote for the conservative? Because Wales has a few Welsh national people. So tell them, why are you voting for the English Conservative Party? And try and get. I mean, I don't have that answer, but I'd really be interested to hear their perspective.
I can give you the answer. I can give you the answer straight from the Welsh Party's mouth, is that Welsh independence is not a popular movement.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
It's a horribly unpopular movement. And now, you say that, but the Scotland Independence Party had its best year ever.
That's true.
Like, Scotland Independence Party became the power broker in the frickin' government.
I think the Scots are wild, dude.
the Scots are, but this is what I'm saying, is that like it is tribalism.
Yeah, right.
And so if we're going to have a system in which people have a bit of a caveman brain energy, then I would rather the caveman brain be as informed as possible. Right. And the best way to inform the voter is to have multiple self-defining groups of politicians and how they want to associate.
Right. Speaking of caveman brain,
yes,
we're going to move into a new topic for this last 20 minutes.
Geico.
No.
We don't have sponsors.
We're not going to save
more on car insurance.
We're not going to save any money on car insurance. We're not sponsored.
You take your khakis and go back to your country.
Yeah. Travis specifically wanted to talk about something interesting, which was East versus West. And we're not talking about the Middle East. We're not talking about even Putin.
Rap.
West Coast. Yeah. We're not talking about the Pacific versus the Atlantic. We're talking about philosophies.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, Travis, I'm going to let you take it away here for a bit.
Well, me and Eric have been talking about this for a while, and I think right now the West is an animal on the road that's been run over by several beer trucks and semis.
16-wheelers.
Like it's just, there's gray matter, there's skull, and it's all over the road, and it's 50 feet everywhere.
Yeah, this is unsettling.
There's just nothing there, and the Western civilization. I need to clarify what I'm talking about here. Like Western values, like the individual, and like the self-defining individual, are limping along on the crutches of a cliche Christianity at this point, especially in America. And Europe, it's already like there's not even an old man anymore.
Yeah.
He's dead too. In America, it's like a decrepit old man limping along, and one day somebody's gonna kick over that stick. It's not gonna be very fun. It's probably gonna happen in 20 or 30 years, as soon as the evangelical church in this country is withered. And so I've been thinking a lot about this, and as I watch university students basically undermine and devalue what their own university has been predicated upon in the first place, which is an area of free thought and not just ideological landscapes, I'm beginning to wonder if the West is even able to remember its own values. And right now, like if you look at the East, like you look at Japan and South Korea and areas in China, especially Hong Kong,
Taiwan.
Taiwan.
These freaking Singapore.
Yeah, Singapore. Like these Eastern nations have adopted Western values, and not just like the cliches that are limping along. Like they've adopted the Iron Man arguments. It's like we're gonna have a university where any student can say anything. Okay, it doesn't matter how horrible or stupid it is, they can say it. And but they've also retained huge portions of their own identity in the East.
The Confucianism is stronger in the Far East than it's really ever been. It's the dominant assumption is that you have a Confucianist, and we can get into what Confucianism is exactly, but yeah, I this is what I've been observing too. Spot on.
What I would say about this is that it really, really helps to cling to something when it is so obvious that it could be forcibly taken away from you. To have something wither and die is one thing because it feels inevitable and you don't even really see it coming. That's just life happening. But when you have a big, scary, powerful force that is so antithetical to the values that you hold, and I'm talking about China. The Chinese Communist Party will, if Japan's military and if the United States just fell off the planet, hypothetically speaking, what would the Communist Chinese Party do? It would absorb all of the coastal cities. It would go after South Korea. It would go after Japan. It would go after all of Southeast Asia. It would completely and totally just take whatever it wanted. Now, the United States has not just fallen off the face of the earth, thankfully, for these countries. And because of the threat of retaliation, it has stayed the communists from going on a full-on rampage throughout all of Asia. And so, but Korea and Japan and all these people still recognize that danger. It's right over there. And it's on our doorstep. So we're going to cling to what we feel is precious to us.
Right.
And it grows and it strengthens. The United States, for the last 30, 40 years, since the end of the Cold War, has not had that big bad enemy.
Right.
After 9/11, we tried to make it radical Islamic terrorism, Al Qaeda, and then eventually ISIS. But in our efforts to combat that new threat, we sacrificed a lot of our freedoms and values because we cared about security and protection. Because it was not a looming big threat, but a can I trust my neighbor type threat.
And it wasn't an ideological opponent. It was just a bunch of people running around with weapons who shouldn't have them.
It was a physical threat rather than an ideological
fear
opponent.
For your life.
So the United States has not had an ideological opponent that the populace has been able to rally behind and say, yes, we are afraid of this, because it's going to take away our freedoms. Instead, the United States population and a lot of Europe has said, we are willing to get rid of our tradition of what we believe in, our Western values, in order to preserve our lives. So in terms of...
And essentially, for our lives is our well-being now.
Yes.
Now we're saying quality of life is all that matters, more than freedoms, more than liberties. And if we can sacrifice those for the greater good, for the communal quality of life, then we'll do it.
And Americans and Europeans tend to be, especially Western Europeans, tend to be way more super hyper individualistic. They're choosing not to have kids because they care more about spending money on themselves. I want to make my life comfortable. Right? There's less and less people doing that. I will say Japan does struggle right now with trying to keep up with
there's something weird going
the
on.
birthing
There's
thing there. But I think I think that's a different problem than a values thing.
I think what you're trying to say is that just because the West is weak, it doesn't mean that the philosophical foundations of the West are weak. And this is the question. Here's my question. This is the principle that makes me a conservative, and I am a nationalist, very red-blooded, but not as much as some people. And this idea is
some people in this room.
It's okay to love your country,
Michael.
No, it's definitely okay to love your country, and I do. But what is America?
Right.
And I define America very much as the good old-fashioned republic of ideas. And my patriotism, my love for this country is more about the soul of the country than it is about the actual country. And I see the soul, the fire of human liberty moving east.
Yeah.
I see the fire of human liberty moving east. And I see that because of how eminently compatible. Okay, so Rome and China were the two massive philosophical capitals of the world.
Right.
On Rome, you have, and I'm talking about the Roman Empire, like,
Right.
the whole thing, and the Chinese Empire, the whole thing. You have Stoicism. You have Aristotelian logic.
Romatas.
Yes, you have honor, duty, logical sequence is basically everything in Europe was built around the belief in logic sequence. At the rebellion against mysticism, with some attempt to reincorporate mysticism, particularly with the Catholic Church.
Doing what's right for your family.
Yes, and so you have that in the West, and then you combine that with Christianity, which is the salvation comes from the individual, and then inevitably you have this downpouring of every soul is the same, which has produced every political innovation in the history of the world. China. You have three basic philosophical presuppositions. You have one of the great emperors proposed legalism, which is highly similar to the theology of the Old Testament: eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, harsh punishments. Then you have Lao Tzu, who's a freaking hippie weirdo, and he was wandering on the back of a yak to just wander into the universe. When some rando said, hey, write down your thoughts before you do, and he did, and that produces the Tao Te Ching. And the Tao Te Ching basically teaches embrace the seeming contradictions of the world. Embrace the fact that, which is very easy for a Christian to do because we are a religion of paradoxes. But he was saying, the good leader at the end of the road will let the people say, look, what we have done all on our own. And then you have Confucius. And Confucius, frickin' giant of a man, founder of modern conservatism, in my opinion, throughout the whole world. He was the father of modern conservatism. Lincoln didn't know it, but he was Confucius. And a Confucianist. And but that theology is basically what works in the past is likely to work now, and if it doesn't, get rid of it. Super self-explanatory. That's conservatism. And that means the family structure has worked in the past, it'll probably work now. Unless we find some element of it that's evil, we will keep the family structure. And he pushed that belief. And Christian missionaries from Europe came into China with Bibles and the book of the wisdom of Confucius because they saw them as so eminently compatible. And what I see popping up in Singapore and Taiwan particularly, and Hong Kong and South Korea and Japan is these reinforcings of those really old European ideas of honoring the family, building something better than what you left behind, all these things. And the only thing they're missing is a consummate belief in the individual, which I think will come when Christianity moves to them. Yeah. I think once they develop their theology of the individual, they will be unstoppable. And China, as it exists today, the CCP, the frickin' Nazi fascists that they are, frickin' carting off ethnic minorities to sterilize them, will not hold against that. And that flame is more American. Those series of ideas is more American than what I see in the Western world.
So a really good case example that a lot of people miss out on is the fusion of the West and East and Russia in the early 20th century. And a lot of people don't understand that Russia was actually an Eastern nation.
Oh, yeah.
Philosophically.
Absolutely.
It was not a Western country. And basically remained a dormant Eastern nation until the late 60s and 70s.
If you look at the history of it, it was Peter the Great that tried to turn it from an Eastern country into a Western country. Ultimately, I think that he failed.
And And so he kind of began the process, but I don't think Russia really began to quote unquote westernize until they began to really invite Western intellectuals into Russia, into their universities. And they started programs in Russia to send students out into the West, and they'd come back. And Peter started that, but that began going on a massive scale, like the 1850s and 60s and 70s. These students would come back
from France, learned French,
and they took the worst version of Western values and deconstructed their nation to the point where all they had left was a totalitarian state.
Well, they heard the drunk ramblings of a Prussian man, and they said, "A Russian man? Oh, I like that."
And that was a lot of things, though. Like in the 1870s, it was modern, like Ayn Rand individualism that was running rampant in Russia. It was Western values, like quote unquote, like
right? Because it was aggressive hyper capitalism
that slammed into this domestic Eastern nation so quickly that in the end you ended up with this horrible regime. I think that's what happens when you have two different worldviews that clash violently. There's not a whole bunch of processing.
You have to have a bad reaction.
And this is why I genuinely believe that Russia was more Western than Eastern, is that there's two different worldviews. There's the Eastern and the Western, and they are personified by Hegel and by Confucius, or by Laozi. Sorry, Hegel says thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Let your idea butt heads with my idea. We'll fight until one of them dies, and that's Westernism. The Laozi Easternism says, "Come meet me, have tea with me, and we will produce something better and more beautiful together."
Right.
And that's East versus West, and Russia went hardcore West in terms of the Hegelist dialectic. Like, let's just have these things to fight until there's blood on the ground and whatever lives.
Right.
And that's why the East is winning out in the long run, is because they are more cooperative. They want to cooperate with different ideologies and find that all truths are God's truths. So sit down, brother, and let us reason together.
They've also, the East has had a lot more time to process what's been going on in the world, what happened in the 20th century, and the East has had a chance to really slowly adopt what we would call Western values. And what I think is going to happen, this is really why I wanted to start this whole discussion, I think the West in Europe and in the US is going to die. And then the East is going to rise. And then the West in the US and Europe is going to resurrect, but not under the same exact presuppositions and values that we had
Hard
before.
reboot.
I think Michael's right that it's a lot about necessity. America is uniquely isolated from the rest of the world, and now we are uniquely wealthy and have no cares. And the people in the East, especially in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, these are people who live under constant threat, who don't live with just abject luxury and wealth and prosperity. They have to find what really works, and they have to find what really will preserve their way of life, quality of life, freedoms, and eventual prosperity for everyone.
One of my great fears, but at the same time, in a weird way, a hope for Western values to become actually Western values again in the United States, is unfortunately to have an actual clash happen in the United States between ideologies. And so that looming threat of it's gonna happen.
The clash within the United States has already happened.
Because
it's happening.
That's what's being personified in cancel culture.
What he's talking about is it's happening kind of in popular culture, but it's really happening in the universities right now.
Yep.
That's where the battle's happening.
I don't think there's any
Yes.
battle in the universities anymore. The battle's over in the universities. It's only in pop culture. It's
That's
only
true.
in the greater
No.
culture.
It's still. I would argue it's still happening in the universities. I think there's been especially in the
There's an
last 4 years.
enclave in the universities
there's-
that's getting stronger.
They don't
I
have
agree with you.
100% control, right? The people perpetrating these
It's
ideas.
very near close.
It's near close, but there are still pockets of resistance, like here at Corbin, where we can actually discuss things. But once
But there's
that
no battle in
disappears-
Corbin either.
The universities, I would say, are getting better overall. The real clash, what he's talking about, is the people the millennials who grew up in the universities and had the professors that were brainwashed in the 60s. Those are the people that we have
The
to
battle's
worry about.
happening in the
that-
corporate world right now. That's where it's
Yeah,
happening.
and
That's
it's
where power.
yeah,
We're
because
seeing it super
literally,
prevalent.
PSU literally trains students, like English degree students, to go into law firms
Mhm.
and to handle really specific cases.
And yeah, just here's my prophecy. Here's what I genuinely think is coming of the world. And I think that there's two possible futures. And both end with at least a period of Eastern domination. Either China, specifically communist China, is going to get super powerful super quick. It's compound interest. They're about to explode. And America is there's three things America can do. They're either going to stand back, keep being our isolationist selves, and let it happen, in which case we'll die a slow and painful death over a century. We're going to mobilize, and we're going to fight, and then we're either going to win or we're going to die and give our last fighting breath to the heirs of the revolution, which is going to be places like Taiwan and Japan and South Korea. And if that's the fate of America, if either of those things are the fate of America, either we survive or we die, if we give our last breath fighting for that fire, that is a proper end. That's good. And I don't think that's the proper end. I think America is still powerful enough, and the minds of our population is still open-minded enough to recognize, like, if China went full bad guy, I think we could mobilize the whole population real quick.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
And I think that it could happen real quick, and I think that it would be a proper fight.
If China detonated a nuke over Tokyo, right?
Right.
That you would get the whole world to piss on 'em.
And we're getting close. We're getting close. I don't know what's happening on social media right now with how hard it is to share this information, but they're rounding up the Uyghurs. They're making
It's
They're
Legitimate
making-
concentration camps.
they're making the Holocaust Part 2 right now, and I'm seeing a few people who are defending them. And God bless those tanky idiots, but and I think I don't think the battle's going to happen in America. I think the battle is going to happen on the international stage, and there will be elements in America who are really rooting that China wins.
What I'll be interested to see is the wild card of Russia. I'll be honest to see if they're going to take the side of the West, the side of China, or if they're going to try and remain neutral in this upcoming conflict, this
There would be
ideological
no
conflict.
neutrality if that actually happens,
They would
to where
take
there
the
are
side of
guns
the
of
West.
I
Yeah.
think so. I think they would, because
They take the winning
I mean,
side.
for crying out loud, when we in World War II, we had allies who were dictators that were supplying the allied nations with stuff. The Portuguese had a dictator who liked Franco but hated Hitler. And Portugal was one of the first members to join NATO, I believe. And so, in terms of Putin, he knows how volatile communism is because he lived it. I think that as the dictator that he is, and as he solidifies that, I think that he will actually more side with the West than he would the East.
What Putin wants is he wants a proper fight between America and China. He wants to get involved with it as little as possible, side with America at the last minute, and then be leader of the of the new world when everything's done. That's what he wants.
Yeah.
He wants to be the perfect synthesis between East and West, so he's going to play neutral for the first little while, and then he's going to swing in at the last moment, and then he's going to be king of everything.
I'm okay with that.
No.
Yeah. Putin's king of everything. Well, I want to end on some
Better than
some
G, I guess.
positive airs of change, which is this letter signed by 150 so center leftists from put it out again.
I know it's the.
Oh, I know
you're
what
talking about the Harper letter.
Harper, yes, the Harper letter, where they are finally realizing that these absolute abandonings of Western values of free speech, of freedom of thought, of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis.
Thesis, antithesis.
I know, I'm tripping over myself. The rejection of that is going to lead to our destruction, and so they're finally standing up, and it's just embarrassing to see some of them, respond to cancel culture because they signed this letter against cancel culture. They're already like stepping down from the letter, but most of them are holding strong, and I think that we're gonna go too far.
How weak do you have to be to put your letter or put your signature on a letter that says cancel culture is bad, and then cancel culture comes over and says we're gonna cancel you for putting your name on that letter, and then you
so
say,
you
"Oh, I'm
listen.
sorry, Mr. Cancel Culture. I'll take my name off."
The myth of
You
cancel
weakling.
culture is that it doesn't exist. And everyone apologizes. If you apologize, you die.
Look
But
at
if
Goya
you don't
Foods.
apologize, that's what I was going to say. Goya is going to do just fine.
More profitable than ever.
No, we're not talking about Goya beans on this podcast.
This is just the end.
I
of-
don't care.
It's just an example.
That's-
It's just an
No.
example.
That's
you
a
don't
good
have to buy. You don't have to buy into cancel
If
culture.
we end the
you don't have to
podcast
get
with
canceled.
3 out of 4 of us happy, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
You have one last thing to say, Travis?
Get your life together, you dumb son of a bitch. For God's sake.
God bless you
This
all.
is how we always
on
end.
it.
Yeah.
The world depends on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. God bless America.
Go to bed, Kanye. Kanye.
Kanye West.
Kanye West 2020, baby!